The date was October 14th, 1952. The time was midnight, straight up. The location was the Zebra Room at the back of the Lenox Lounge, the holy of holies, where the air was always thick with cigar smoke and secrets. But on this night, the air was different. It was brittle, like thin ice over a deep, dark river. The usual jazz quartet had been sent home. The patrons had been cleared out. There were only 3 men in the room, and the silence between them was loud enough to break eardrums. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat at his usual table, a linen napkin tucked into his collar, calmly dissecting a porterhouse steak. Across from him sat Vincent, the butcher, Morrow, a capo from the Genovese family, a man whose suit cost more than most Harlem residents made in a year. And standing directly behind Bumpy, casting a long, trembling shadow over the table, was Big Sam. Big Sam was a mountain of a man, a street enforcer, known for cracking skulls with his bare hands. He had been Bumpy's muscle for 5 years. But Bumpy knew what Vinnie Morrow didn't know. Bumpy knew that Sam's mother was sick, that gambling debts were piling up, and that 3 days ago, Vinnie had handed Sam an envelope thick with cash to put a bullet in the back of Bumpy Johnson's head. Bumpy knew it all. He had known it before the ink was dry on the bills. But instead of a shallow grave, Bumpy had given Sam an invitation. He had assigned Sam to guard him tonight, specifically for this meeting. "The steak is excellent tonight, Vinnie," Bumpy said, slicing a piece of meat with surgical precision. He didn't look up. "You Italians, you know food, but you don't know loyalty. You think loyalty is something you buy at the market, like tomatoes. You squeeze it to see if it's ripe. You pay for it. You take it home." Vinnie Morrow shifted in his seat. He was nervous. He kept glancing at Big Sam standing behind Bumpy. He was waiting for the signal. He was waiting for the blood. "I didn't come here to discuss philosophy, Bumpy. I came to discuss territory, the East Harlem expansion." Bumpy chuckled, a low, dry sound. He finally looked up, his eyes boring into Vinnie's. Then, his gaze drifted, just for a second, to the space above Vinnie's shoulder, as if addressing the ghosts in the room. "You know the story of Judas, Vinnie? 30 pieces of silver. A bad deal, if you ask me. Adjusted for inflation, it's not enough to buy a man's soul. But some men sell cheap." Behind Bumpy, Big Sam flinched. Sweat was pouring down his face, stinging his eyes. He was gripping his hands together to stop them from shaking. "I trust my people, Vinnie," Bumpy continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I trust them because I feed them. I protect them. I don't buy them." Slowly, deliberately, Bumpy reached into his jacket. Vinnie's hand twitched toward his own holster, but Bumpy was faster. He pulled out his Colt .45. The metal gleamed under the dim chandelier. But he didn't point it at Vinnie. He placed the gun on the table. With a slow spin, he rotated the weapon until the dark eye of the barrel was pointing directly at his own chest. He slid the gun across the linen tablecloth until it rested within arm's reach of Big Sam. "You think you own him, Vinnie?" Bumpy asked, picking up his wineglass. "You think that envelope in his pocket makes him yours? Let's test the merchandise." Bumpy didn't turn around. He simply spoke to the air behind him. "Pick it up, Sam." The silence that followed was agonizing. It stretched for 10 seconds, 20. Vinnie Morrow watched with wide eyes, a cruel smile beginning to form on his lips. This was it. The old fool was handing them the victory. "Pick it up." Big Sam reached out. His hand was a giant, trembling claw. He grasped the handle of the Colt. He lifted it. The barrel was leveled at the back of Bumpy Johnson's head. Distance, 6 inches. A miss was impossible. "Do it, Sam," Vinnie hissed, leaning forward, his eyes hungry. "Do it, and you're a rich man. Do it." Bumpy took a sip of his wine. He didn't tense up. He didn't close his eyes. He cut another piece of steak, and brought it to his mouth. He was chewing with his back to a loaded gun held by a desperate man. It was a display of dominance so absolute, so terrifyingly divine, that it sucked the oxygen out of the room. He was betting his life on one simple fact, that his legend was heavier than Vinny's gold. Sam stood there, the gun shaking so violently it rattled against his cufflinks. He looked at the back of Bumpy's neck, the neck of the man who had paid for his daughter's braces, the man who had walked him home when he was too drunk to stand, the man who was the king of Harlem. Then he looked at Vinny, the sweating, greedy outsider. Sam tried to squeeze the trigger. His finger turned white, but his soul rebelled. The psychological weight of Bumpy Johnson was a physical force field. To shoot Bumpy was to shoot God in his own church. I can't, Sam choked out. It started as a whisper and ended as a sob. I can't, boss. I can't do it. The gun clattered from his hand onto the table, knocking over the salt shaker. Big Sam, the terrifying enforcer, collapsed to his knees, burying his face in his hands, weeping like a child who had been lost in the dark. Bumpy didn't turn around to look at him. He simply reached out, picked up the gun, and slipped it back into his holster. He looked at Vinny Morrow. The Italian boss was pale, his mouth slightly open, witnessing a power he couldn't comprehend. "You see, Vinny?" Bumpy said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "That's the difference between us. You have employees. I have believers." He poured a second glass of wine and pushed it across the table to the stunned mobster. "Drink up, then get out of my neighborhood, and take your 30 pieces of silver with you." Vinny Morrow stood up, his legs unsteady. He didn't touch the wine. He looked at the weeping giant on the floor, then at the calm, intellectual predator at the table. He realized then that he could never win Harlem. He could burn it. He could bomb it. But he could never own it. He turned and fled the Lenox Lounge, the sound of Big Sam's sobs chasing him out into the night. When the door clicked shut, Bumpy finally turned in his chair. He reached down and placed a hand on Sam's heaving shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He knew, and Sam knew, that the debt was paid. What Vinny Morrow never knew, what Big Sam never knew, and what only Bumpy Johnson knew, as he sat there finishing his steak, was that the Colt .45 was empty. He had removed the firing pin an hour before the meeting. It was a bluff, a gamble of insane proportions. But Bumpy Johnson never gambled on cards or dice. He only gambled on human nature. And on that night, he bet on his own myth, and he won the pot. The gun was silent, but the message rang out louder than any shot ever fired. The king didn't need bullets. He only needed to be Bumpy,